Welcome into episode 238 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. The Bruins fell to the Red Wings the other night in Detroit, 5-4 final. Bit of a sloppy game. One of those games where the officiating was heavily involved on both sides. But Bridget and Scott, hope you guys are doing well. Had a good weekend. Let's jump into the opening shifts here.
Yeah, so my opening shift is just that missing half of your regular defense core, a lot more noticeable in game 2 than game 1. Against Toronto on Thursday night, Bruins overcame it very well and beat a good Toronto team. On Saturday, more noticeable. Mason Lohrei, after a great first game in the NHL, struggled a bit in his second game. Also, in fairness to him, had a couple tough penalty calls against him. I'm not convinced that either of his penalties was actually even a penalty, but that was sort of the way that this game went. But he had a couple tough moments even besides the penalties. Parker Wotherspoon, I think, was at fault on Detroit's third goal. He wound up playing a very limited role, certainly in the third period and really the second half of the game. Ian Mitchell was fine, but didn't really notice him getting as involved offensively as I think his strength when he's playing well is clearly contributing offensively and being active on the rush and in the offensive zone. And I just don't think he really got much of a chance to do that. I think he spent a lot of time in his own zone. So, yeah, the Bruins give up 5 goals for the first time this season. Give up 2 power play goals for the first time. 3 5-on-5 goals, first time they've done that. So you just noticed some breakdowns. Probably wasn't Linus Ullmark's best game behind them either. But, that's my shift. Just team defense wasn't there, and the absence of McAvoy, Grzelcyk, and Forbort was noticeable.
Scotty, that was a long shift. You must be winded. We all really
gotta get my bio steal.
Yeah. Hurry up and take some of that. So I think all of us really have a lot of thoughts on the defense. I have a little bit to say about the first line of Coyle, DeBrusk, and Marchand. I thought that of the offensive lines that was the trio that had the strongest game. I think you started to see the chemistry that could be there. I'm not sure if it's, and we can talk about this later, what the best line combinations are, because we talked about just before we get on here, maybe the bottom 6 was stagnant, even though the top 6 looked to be flowing fairly well. And I thought that Marchand line looked good. The DeBrusk setup on the Coyle goal was really nice. One of the bright spots in the loss.
For me, it's one of those nights where you sit back and you say, oh, wow, I guess the Bruins aren't going to go undefeated this year in regulation. They finally obviously lost their first game in regulation. And while we all knew that was inevitable, the questions for me naturally that follow are, how does this team now bounce back? How is this team going to be characterized this year after defeats in regulation, tough losses where you're in it, but you're on the wrong side of the scoreboard? Will this team have that punch back ability that they had last year after a loss and not allow losses to compile into losing streaks? And so obviously there's takeaways from the game as to why they lost. As I said, it was inevitable, but it's a tough stretch of hockey this month. And so now let's see. We've seen this Bruins team so far through October kind of win games. Sometimes games they didn't really play great in. I feel like they're getting outshot a lot this year in games. So October was kind of their month when they weren't playing great, they were still getting wins. And now they get their first regulation loss of the season. Let's just see how this team's makeup is through adversity.
Yeah, and to that point, they have a huge challenge when it comes to bouncing back, because Monday night they're in Dallas to face a very good Stars teams. And we know they still don't have Grzelcyk. He's on long-term IR. They don't have McAvoy. He's still appealing his suspension. As of recording this Sunday night, there's not been any ruling. But even first off, as I said on our last podcast, I don't expect anything to get cut off. Even if something does, it's only going to be one game. So no matter what, he's going to miss Monday's game. And Forbert's still day-to-day. He did travel with the team, which indicates to me that they think there's at least a chance he was going to play on this road trip. Obviously, he missed the first game. So I guess we'll see if he's ready for Dallas. And even though, as we've talked about plenty, like, I don't think Forbert helps you all that much at 5-on-5, but he can help you on the penalty kill. And as I mentioned, we did see the Bruins for the first time this season give up multiple power play goals in one game. Obviously, part of that is that they were shorthanded 8 times because there were just a bajillion penalty calls. Not all of those are full power plays. Some were like a few seconds here and there, but we did see the Detroit power play sort of did a good job breaking down the Bruins penalty kill and ended up with some seam passes that the Bruins are usually, I would say early in the season, the Bruins were giving some of those up and the goaltending was bailing them out. Then they tightened up. They weren't giving them up. And now we saw that kind of come back as a problem on Saturday.
Yeah, no, the penalty kill, Forbert could, we know how Forbert could help the penalty kill. Luckily for the Bruins, he seems to be close to coming back. And so they're not going to be down 3 defensemen for much longer. But as we talked about, Grzelcyk is going to be the longest. McAvoy, I don't think, is going to get any games taken off his suspension. So that means the Dallas game and the Islanders game, he'll probably miss both and be back for Montreal. I thought that we asked a question last podcast, how sustainable is it to have Witherspoon, Mason Lohrei, and Ian Mitchell on your, as fill-ins, and could the Bruins win all 4 games with those 3 guys in there? And the answer is no. They lost. And there were certain times in the game where you could really see the lack of experience. I thought the third period was really rough for Witherspoon. He was on the ice for 2 of those goals in Detroit's comeback and out of position and just making the wrong read. He had an assist on the Coyle goal in the second period, and he looked good on that. He won the puck along the boards, made an outlet, ends up with DeBrusk and Coyle for the goal. But then he just had these breakdowns, and that was it for the Bruins. I mean, they headed into that third period winning, and then some rough shifts for him with Shattenkirk as his partner, and it didn't look good. It was easy to see how that could get exposed.
Yeah, that stretch in the third period there where Detroit had 3 goals in a matter of minutes, really, that's something that you just don't see if the Bruins are at full health on defense. That's just AHL defenseman getting exposed. Really, I mean, the Dylan Larkin goal, Witherspoon, just, you can't, as a right defenseman, you can't be on the 5 feet from Shattenkirk on the left side. Like, that's just in transition. It's just the wrong play, and you don't have the speed to match Larkin. So yeah, it's just, yeah, like defense is the strength of their team, no doubt about it. Defense and goaltending, their defensive depth is being tested right now with 3 regulars out of the lineup. But shifting to Scott's opening take with Lohrei, what did you 2 see out of Lohrei in Toronto? Because I haven't had a chance to discuss the Toronto game with you guys, but what did he do well in Toronto that he just couldn't do against Detroit?
Well, I think if you start in his own zone, and then against Toronto, after he did bobble a couple breakouts like very early in the Toronto game, and then was really clean the rest of the way and consistently starting transition opportunities. I thought against Detroit he had more rough breakouts or just trying to force plays that weren't there. I thought he struggled to get as involved offensively, which was certainly a strength against Toronto as well. Down the stretch, Montgomery was throwing him out there for like almost every offensive zone shift because he kept making things happen. And against Detroit, Montgomery threw him out for a lot of those O-zone shifts again, but he just wasn't as involved or as noticeable or making as many plays. And then obviously the Detroit's 5th goal, Andrew Copp just really outmuscles Lohrei along the boards, gets position on him, holds him off to get the zone entry. And then I did think Ian Mitchell was a little bit at fault as well. I thought he gave JT Compher way too much of a gap. Compher gets a shot off that hits the post, and then Kopp's there to bury the rebound. Just again beat Lohrei to the puck. A little bit of a fortunate bounce went right to him, but that was a tough play for Lohrei too. And like I said, on the box score, it's going to look even worse because he also had 2 penalties in the third period. One that led to a goal against. Like I said, I thought both were marginal calls at best. One's a hook where I think it was either Kopp or Compher. Those two should not be on the same team because I just get them confused all the time. Like chicken winged and grabbed his stick under his elbow to hold it there. And then the second one, Lohrei nudges Michael Rasmussen, and Rasmussen just collapses into the boards and hits his face on the dasher in the process, which made it look worse. But in my mind, was really Rasmussen's doing. There's no way the contact Lohrei made caused him to flop that hard.
Did you hear what Brick said? He said it's a pushing call, like a pushing penalty, because it wasn't a full cross check. It was barely contact. And yeah, the one where he loses his stick, those are the ones that bother me too. Okay, clearly the other guy is making it look much worse than what it was. And I will say Larkin had a play I think it was in the first period where he acted like he died, drew a penalty, and then he was on the ice for a while. And there was a lot of kind of that fake, I don't know, more of a soccer-y feel to it during different parts. And that's one of the things about hockey that I always say is better than other sports. You don't usually see that, but I feel like there was some of that in the Detroit game for sure. I will say, to answer your question, Brian, the big difference from the Toronto game to the Detroit game, he wasn't paired with Brendan Carlo in the Detroit game, and he was paired with Brendan Carlo for a majority of the Toronto game, and I like that pairing. And they ended up going this game against Detroit with putting Carlo and Lindholm on the same pairing, where I thought it worked best when they were separate, and you kind of spread out your top 2 defensemen rather than stick them together. I know, Scott, you're looking up what the matchup was for who they were getting sent out against, and that's probably the reasoning for it. But I just felt like you gave Lohrei a safety net with Carlo there on his side. You got these 2 big guys. I felt like they were working well together. I just liked the way that combination looked. And then you move him with some of the less experienced guys. And even, I know Shattenkirk's been in the league a long time, but in the Bruins system, he hasn't been. So you're moving him around with people that I think he's less comfortable playing with than somebody like Brendan Carlo, who we mentioned is probably having the best stretch of his career. Put him with someone who needs help.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'm glad you bring up Carlo, because I think a lot of people are saying the same thing, and that's that what you just mentioned, Bridget. He's had the best start to his career, and he just seems to be a little bit more physically demanding out there, a little bit, using his size to be a little bit more imposing, a little bit more of a leader, a physical presence. It's not. I mean, you look at Brandon Carlo's career; he's always been a great defensive player. I mean, his career plus minus is through the roof for a 26-year-old player. I think he was plus 44 last year or something like that. Career, yeah, it's right here. He's a career plus 107. So obviously a lot of that's system based, but he's always been a very dependable defenseman. But he just seems to have taken that next step from a leadership perspective.
Yeah, I mean, Bridget, you touched on, but I do think it was. First off, I mean, Lohrei and Shattenkirk were together basically the second half of the Toronto game, and they did look good together. And Montgomery had done that because he wanted Lindholm and Carlo out against the Matthews line, which he thought was winning too many of its shifts. And I think Detroit, he wanted them out against the Larkin DeBrincat line. And even on the road, he was able to get that matchup a lot, able to get Lindholm and Carlo out against Larkin and DeBrincat. But to your point, Lohrei and Shattenkirk weren't as good together Saturday as they were Thursday. So you do wonder, at some point, should he have gone to Lohrei Carlo, Lindholm Shattenkirk, whatever. And, maybe for a tough D-zone draw, you can still go Lindholm Carlo. But yeah, because then you ended up with like a sort of a rotation where Wotherspoon was playing sparingly in the third period, so then you'd get some Laurie Mitchell shifts, some Mitchell Shattenkirk shifts. And it's like that bottom three was kind of rotating through, so it seemed hard for any of them to really find a rhythm. While Lindholm Carlo got the toughest matchups. And quickly, just to correct myself, I think I said Lorai's 2 penalties were in the third period. They were both in the second period.
Yeah. So I mean, we'll continue to see his trial here. It sounds like he's 1-1 so far. But again, the team. Look, when you give up 5 goals, the team wasn't all that great defensively either.
He still has the most upside of the 3, I think. Even though like he had the 2 polar like games, right? He was really good. He showed a lot of his upside against Toronto, which is a tough team to play against. And those are tough guys that you're defending against. But I think he still has the most upside. So because we're still throughout this time until we get to see McAvoy come back and Grzelcyk come back, there's somebody that's going to stick around. So like there's room for one of these guys to stick around for a little bit. And I don't know if you guys have a preference as of yet, or you still want to watch the way that Mitchell works in Lorai, and I don't think Witherspoon's going to be the one to stay around, but I still think that Lorai has the most upside, and if he gets back to the way he played against Toronto, then he'd probably be the one sticking around a little bit longer.
I don't doubt it at all. That's exactly who I would choose. The upside is, I mean, he's the guy you want going forward, right? He's a top 4 fixture for this team. If not full time this year, like for the next decade, like he's the guy that you're circling, not the other 2. So, and for good reason. And yeah, what you saw against Toronto, the way he can create offense and join the rush, and be mobile at the top of the blue line in the offensive zone, like, and just find passing lanes, and the defensive side will continue to grow, but the offensive side that he has, you just can't teach that.
Yeah, I mean, he has to be the one to stick around at least until Grzelcyk comes back, and if he plays well, then he stays in the lineup all year. Grzelcyk is out through Thanksgiving. The first game he would be eligible to return is that Saturday after Thanksgiving down in New York. So yeah, Lorai should be the one to get the extended look. He's the only one that can handle a top 4 role out of that group. Like you're obviously not giving Parker Wotherspoon top 4 minutes. You're not giving Ian Mitchell top 4 minutes. And I don't Forbort should be back soon, but I don't like the idea of Forbort in a top 4 role. Like he should be, if he's playing, he should be third pairing PK specialist, and that's it. That's all I really want Derek Forbort to be. So yeah, you keep giving Lorai opportunities, and unless he has like 3, 4, 5 rough games in a row, and it's like, you know what, like we're clearly like hurting him by continuing to throw him out there. Let's get him back to Providence. Unless that happens, like you give him the opportunities. You see what you have in him, because again, the upside is he plays well. We see more of him playing the way he played against Toronto, and now you have a top 4 defenseman going forward, not just next year and beyond, but this year. Like then the conversation shifts to who's coming out of the lineup out of Forbort, Grzelcyk, and Shattenkirk, and we can talk about that if that's how this plays out. But in my mind, if Lorai plays well through this stretch, like he's sticking around, and he's sticking around in a top 4 role.
Yeah, and it was just a weird game too. Like there was not a lot of flow to it. It was kind of a hard hockey game to watch if you really think about all the penalties and the frustration that was causing players. And it was not an ideal game to begin with. Lorai still got the second most amount of ice time of anyone behind Lindholm. Even considering the fact he was in the box twice, he still got a lot of minutes. I don't think that after this game, if you think about it, who played a worse game? Witherspoon, Mitchell, or Lorai in Detroit? Who, like, if you were to rank 1, 2, 3?
I would say Witherspoon had the worst game. I think Lohrei made more mistakes than Mitchell. Obviously, as you mentioned, he was out there more. He got tougher matchups. He has the puck on his stick more, so like there's more opportunities to make mistakes. But I don't know. Again, Mitchell, I just thought was kind of just invisible, and with a defenseman that's almost neither good nor bad. Other than, like I said, maybe having a bad gap on that one goal, but yeah, I mean, none of them had a good game. I'll say that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, ultimately for me, it's, Mitchell and Witherspoon, they're just a guy. The Bruins want Lohrei to be the guy, like along with like McAvoy, like now and in the future. So I don't think even taking one game snapshots and comparing them, even if Witherspoon and Mitchell had amazing games and Lohrei sucked, it doesn't, you're talking about a blue chip prospect and a couple of journeymen really. So, yeah, I mean, another interesting thing, Bridget, you mentioned it was a tough game to watch. I'm trying to do this thing where I don't get worked up about officiating. I over the last few years, I've just accepted every game. It sucks for every team. But boy, the situational awareness and desire to just be seen at the end of that game by the officials was absurd. I mean, I've never seen a team down a goal with the goalie pulled or about to pull the goalie, whatever, and get called for 2 minor infractions to go down on a 5-on-3. And you look at the calls and it's like, huh? What? What'd you just call? Like the Pasternak trip, the Charlie Coyle hold. It's like, what are you guys doing? Like, talk about just like from a product perspective. You just took a 5-4 game, and now fans of both teams know the outcome now. Detroit now wins. Like, you just made it 5-on-3 with 1:50 to go, and it's like, come on. So that was pretty cool to watch.
And we haven't seen Jim Montgomery super frustrated in his entirety of his first year because that season was going so well. This is probably the angriest we've ever seen him behind the bench. He got called for abuse of officials after the game for whatever he was yelling. And it was probably less what he was saying and more the fact that he was screaming at them the entire game because they were messing up the entire game. So he gets that call. And at that point, who cares? Because you can't go down more than 5-on-3. So just keep, like, at that point, it was kind of incentivized to just however many penalties you feel like committing because it wasn't going to make a difference. The game was over and you can't send anyone else to the box. So Marchand gets in there. I don't know. It was a whole mess.
Yeah, that was clearly a Montgomery's part, a culmination of the whole night. And I think honestly, like, I feel like it was like an intentional effort to get a penalty to make sure he made his point known. Yeah, I mean, the 2 late ones, like, I do think they both were technically penalties. Like, Pasternak was a trip, and in fairness, like, they had called a couple other trips that were just guys getting their stick under someone's skate. So I sort of feel like they had to call that one. Coyle's he does like reach out and grab, I think it was Seider, but it's still a soft call for me. Like, you don't have to call it. You see that a lot. Like, anytime one guy is kind of jumping around another, there's usually some sort of little tug there or something. And yeah, I definitely don't think they had to call that in that situation, even if there was technically like a hold or a tug there.
Well, because Scott, there's technically probably 75 other minor infractions over the course of a game that don't get called because it happens all the time, and that's why I was kind of saying like there's a lack of situational awareness. Like I agree, like technically they're calls, but technically calls get missed all game. So
yeah, the ones that bother me more were the 2 on Lohrei I already mentioned, where I thought both were soft and both were clearly Red Wings players selling it. And then the Carlo interference penalty, and I think that was in the first period, where Dylan Larkin's the one who initiates contact, and somehow Carlo gets called for interference. Like, that was absolutely baffling.
And that was the one where Larkin ended up on the ground for a while, and like that, like, kind of sold it, I think.
Well, and it was one where the Red Wings scored. I think that's when they got their first goal.
Yeah, it was the Raymond power play goal.
So both Detroit power play goals came after penalties that shouldn't have been called. So yeah, like you don't like complaining about refs, but I mean, they unquestionably did impact the game and the result.
Another player who impacted the game early on is, have we talked about Matt Poitras before on this podcast?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Poitras sent back to Guelph, right? He's gone.
Yeah, I heard something like a 9-game trial or something. But so he gets his 4th goal of the season. This one is inarguably his prettiest. I mean, the one against Chicago is nice, showed his breakaway speed and went 5-hole. But the hands on display here, were elite. Poised beyond his years, really. And so he gets his 4th goal of the year, his 7th point in 11 games for a 19-year-old. Looks like the Bruins, as we all know, have found a player. What do you guys think of Poitras' game, and who else stood out to you guys up front?
I'll go first. So that was a beautiful goal. And with it, what you kind of see from him is just that first of all, he sold shot first on the forehand, and then he was able to just very calmly just move to the backhand, put it in, and it completely was able to fool everyone, the defender, the goalie. And I think you just kind of could see his skill set in that he doesn't have to do anything fancy. It wasn't necessarily fancy, and it was just smooth and made it look easy. And he just looked very calm, which is kind of how he's looked the entire time, even though he's 19 and he's playing this was his 11th game in the NHL. And the funny thing is now he has more goals than he has assists. He's got 4 goals and 3 assists. So we're talking about him as a playmaker. And I think unfortunately for him, he could probably even have more point production if he hasn't been rotated as much as he has been. I feel like he's all over the place in every single podcast. We're talking about, who will he play better with? And this in the Detroit game, he ends up with Frederic and Geeky, which they've tried before, but they had moved Poitras with Pasternak and Zaka, and they'd had him with Marchand different games. And I almost feel like he's found a way to impact the game, even when his line mates have been shifted around and chemistry has maybe been a little bit hard to come by for him because of all of the rotation.
Yeah, and he does have an assist in this game too on Pasternak's late power play goal. He has a nice pass from kind of like low in the left circle out to Pasternak at the right point. He, oddly enough, like in this game, he looked better on whether it was power play or 5-on-5, the shifts where he was on a different line, because I thought his actual line with Frederic and Geeky, I think they were very quiet. Bruins got outshot 7-2 when they were on the ice, and they were out there for one of the Detroit goals. I think the 4th one, where they kind of got stuck in the D zone and everyone's scrambling a little bit. And it seems like it was Frederic who messed up the rotation. I say that because he did not get another shift the rest of the game. So I'm assuming that is Montgomery's way of telling Frederic and also us that it was Frederic who screwed up, because basically like the goal scorer, David Perron, sort of like circles out to like the left corner and then like up the left half wall a little bit, and Shattenkirk passes him off and goes to the net front, which I'm almost certain is exactly what the defenseman in the Bruins system is supposed to do. They're not supposed to chase forwards out to like the right out to the elbow. Frederic is supposed to be the one rotating off, and he just doesn't, and ends up leaving a seam pass wide open, and Perron's wide open, and then everyone's scrambling, and it's a goal. So, that line had, as a trio, had a pretty tough game, but Poitras had some good moments when he was away from them and with more creative offensive players.
Another player who I think is starting to step up now, you saw it against Toronto, you saw it last night with a beautiful assist, is getting his game going production-wise, is Jake DeBrusk. Good sign for him as well that he's starting to find the score sheet.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you see him just playing more confidently, making more plays. You know, a similar kind of assist to how he ended up scoring his first goal of the season that was the Toronto game, right? I think. But like he kind of cuts inside and makes a pass to a nice touch pass to a teammate who's kind of gone behind the defense. And against Toronto, it was to Marchand who gets denied, and then DeBrusk's there to bury the rebound. And against Detroit, it's down to Coyle right on the doorstep. Yeah, he's. We all felt like it was coming. We felt like he'd been playing pretty well overall, and the goals and points just weren't there. So I'm not surprised that it's coming, but yeah, I think there does seem to be like a little more urgency too, where he's going to the net and he's getting pucks to the net, and we've said it before, like that's been a point of emphasis that the Bruins are gonna have to score, grittier goals in close, and he's now making some of those happen.
And James Van Riemsdyk too, in that net front, has kind of delivered what we thought he could bring, being a pest out in front of the net. And he's been like that, not just 5-on-5, and he's been rotated around lines as well, but he seems to be able to find that part of his game in each line combination, and also on the power play. He's on that top unit as of right now. He's on that top unit playing net front with Zacha. Have you guys noticed how Zacha is like, he plays the bumper, but he plays all the way at the top of the slot? Like, he plays such a high bumper that I've noticed it over the past few games. He gets the feed there. I don't know if it's easier for that passing lane for whatever reason, and he has a good enough shot to score from there. But I think it's because they have Van Riemsdyk kind of low slot. They throw Zacha up as like a very high bumper. I don't know if you guys noticed that or if I'm just crazy, but
I mean, I think the goal of the bumper is to kind of move up and down to try to create that passing lane. So I don't know if I noticed too much beyond that.
But I noticed that's where he takes his shots from the bumper. Seems to be that higher area, and then looking for the net front tip or put like a rebound put in for JVR.
Yeah, I think that kind of relates to something we talked about last year. Like, remember, I don't know if it was late in the regular season or in the playoffs, but when Zacha was getting time in the bumper on PP1 with Bergeron out, we noted at the time that like he's a lot more active when he plays there. Like, he moves around a lot more in general. Whereas Bergeron, it was much more subtle movement because he's always just looking for that little pocket where he could get that quick shot off, where Marchand, he finds a little bit of space. Marchand hits him at the perfect time. He gets a quick shot off. Zacha, I think, one, that play's not there because Marchand into a left stick isn't going to be, like, you can't get that kind of quick shot off. And setting up that kind of shot isn't really Pasternak's game. Pasternak's more looking for shots for himself. So, sort of out of necessity, Zacha has to be more active. And I do think part of that is popping out high, opening himself up for more passes, and then either shooting from there because he has, as Pasternak put it, a rocket, or playmaking from there. But yeah, I think it's all just part of I think he wants to play that position differently than Bergeron, and I think he has to as well.
Well, and I think you mentioned it, but it changes the dynamic of the power play, right? It makes everybody more shot first, because with Bergeron in the bumper, you alluded to it, but Marchand is focused on being a playmaker, right? He's trying to find that cross ice seam to Pasternak for the one time, or he's trying to find that quick pass down low to the goal line to, at the time, Taylor Hall or DeBrusk or Foligno, whomever, Bertuzzi in the playoffs, or he's trying to find Bergeron in the slot. So Marchand is now looking at himself as solely a facilitator. But now with the bumper play on the opposite side of the ice, it changes Marchand's role. Now he has to be more shot first mentality. And obviously Pasternak is shot first mentality, so he's always willing to shoot. And I just think it presents more more weapons. Not suggesting it's a better power play without Patrice Bergeron. I'm just saying from a stylistic standpoint, I feel like for this unit, it kind of makes everybody want to take a shot when it's there.
Well, and they're clearly still figuring things out. I mean, they go 1 for 4 on Saturday, but they're still at under 17% for the season, which is they're 21st in the NHL right now. So clearly still work to do. And I think part of it is they are still figuring out those roles. I think Marchand still has to get more shot first mentality. I think there's still times that he's holding pucks too long or trying to force passes that aren't really there when he has a shot of his own. So, everyone's still kind of trying to find that right balance and find the plays that work for them. And now, obviously, having McAvoy out the last couple of games, Shattenkirk's the same side shot, but he's also, he's a different player than McAvoy too. So that changes things again. So, it is one area that they definitely still have to get better though, because offensively, they're basically a middle of the pack team right now. And I think that's not the end of the world when your defense and goaltending is as good as the Bruins defense and goaltending is. But if you're going to be like a true contender, eventually you got to have at least like a top 10 offense. It doesn't have to be, one of the top 2 or 3 in the league, but it probably has to be better than middle of the pack.
Offense or power play?
Both really. Right now they're middle of the pack offensively total. They're even lower than that power play. They're 21st.
Yeah. And in the past, their power play has always been a top 10 power play. Still, even in those days, they would have some Jekyll and Hyde tendencies. But yeah, I mean, I guess what we were saying is like in theory, everybody should be shot first mentality. It hasn't happened that way yet. And yeah, it is surprising. Anytime you have a power play with David Pastrnak on it and Brad Marchand and McAvoy, like, you shouldn't be that low. Bridget, I have a question for the two of you regarding the bottom 6, but I don't want to, if you have any thoughts on the power play to finish off okay. So, if this team is healthy up front completely, should Danton Heinen be a permanent fixture, a top 12 forward on this team if everybody's healthy? Obviously, Lucic is out, Lauko's out on the 4th line. But I know that there's a certain identity that 4th lines are often created for by head coaches, right? And a player like Danton Heinen might not fit that rugged, 4th line stereotype of a physical forechecker, whatever. Because look, like, player for player, Danton Heinen's a better hockey player at this stage in their lives, and Milan Lucic, and better hockey player than Jacob Lauko. But those two have a role to play, and they play it really well when they're going. So if this team's healthy up front, has Danton Heinen showed you guys anything in his 3 or 4 games? I think it's 3. That tells you maybe he should be maybe a 3rd liner on this team, or maybe a 4th liner.
So it's kind of a complicated answer, but it's also kind of simple. I don't think he's earned it outright from anyone. So I think that he more than likely would continue being rotated in and out of the lineup, depending on matchups, depending on teams. Do you need a heavier 4th line? Is your 4th line going to be played more or less matchup wise? I think that he's done well enough to not make anybody think, including coaches and management, that he can't handle it. And I think he showed flashes where they've even trusted him on the Pastrnak line. He's somebody who's not super flashy, but does have some of his speed. I think that he's good enough to stay with the team as not necessarily, I won't even call him the extra forward, just one of, say, maybe 2 or 3 forwards that rotate in and out of the lineup.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that. Like, I've described Danton Heinen before as someone who will never really look out of place anywhere or really hurt you all that much. But if everyone's healthy, I like that 4th line of Lucic, Beecher, Lauko. I like the speed that Beecher and Lauko can bring, the physicality of Lucic and Lauko. and even Beecher, who I think has continued to play pretty physical even with those guys out. That just seems to fit better for me. And then higher in the lineup than that, I think I've seen more from Geeky and Frederick than Heinen. And in fairness to Heinen, like, he went a long time without playing in games, and that's tough. And I think you've seen that pop up at times, these 3 games that he's played, where, there's been times where it seems like a guy either closes on him faster than he was anticipating. He's had a couple sloppy turnovers or just like misplaying the puck, which can be a timing thing when you're just not really in rhythm. So, he's going to get some more time here until Lucic and Lauko are back. And we'll see, if he picks it up. But right now, I sort of view him as sort of like just an ideal 13th forward. Like, I will call him that, where he can fill in if anyone in that bottom 6 needs a night off, whether it's they're dealing with something minor or maybe they just had a rough game or whatever. You can easily plug him in left or right wing, and he's going to do just fine. But I think everything, with everyone healthy, I think everything fits together and fits your identity better with other guys and with him probably out.
I agree with you guys both. I think he's a perfect Swiss Army knife 13th forward. And what's great about him is not all 13th forwards have that, like, can plug in a top 6 role. Like, a lot of 13th forwards are like, all right, yeah, go play 4th line. But I do like that versatility of him. So I don't have much more to add. I mean, I like him as a player. Does a lot of little things, and given more opportunity and more consecutive games played, maybe he can outperform a Morgan Geeky or somebody like that or whatever. But I do like the size of Geeky. I mean, look, yeah, you guys kind of covered it perfectly. I have another burning question for the two of you.
But actually, unless I'm jumping ahead and stealing your question, but kind of along the same lines of the Heinen conversation and how the forwards, bottom 6, 4th line shakes out. I think Oscar Steen's making a case to stick around. Like, I've liked what he's brought for the most part. A little quieter Saturday, but I think he's played well. And depending on how long he sticks around, like, the Bruins might have a decision, because I think if he plays 10 games, he would have to go through waivers again. And if he's played well in those 10 games, like, teams might look at that and be like, hey, this guy just played pretty well for 10 games. Let's put in a claim on him. He's at 4 right now. So you have, still a little bit of time to go. And it's possible that Lucic and Lauko are back by then, and he's already sent down to Providence before he gets there. But, it's not like he's played himself out of the lineup by any means, in my mind.
No, but I think you answered your own question, because they're not going to put him through waivers again if they don't have to. So I just think that they'll try to avoid that. But go ahead, Bri. Hit your question.
Well, the good news is, Scott, Mystic Mac McLaughlin did not guess my question. This is a sexy question, honestly, and I was curious about what the split was so far, and it's 6 games played for Ullmark, 5 for Swayman, so they are just straight up splitting time, as we all anticipated. Goals against average for Ullmark through the first month plus 2.3 goals against. Swayman 1.38. Swayman's 5-0, and Ullmark is 4-1. 4-1. 4-1-1.
Yeah, 4-1-1. Yeah.
I'm not gonna really bore, but I guess my question is this: like, who's the better goalie in your guts? Like, who do you trust more as the Bruins goaltender? Because they're gonna do this split all year. Both goalies are great. It's a part of their identity, defense and goaltending. I'm just curious. Like, I haven't really asked you guys straight up. Like, who do you think's a better goalie? I know Ullmark's the reigning Vezina winner. I get it, but
right now, Jeremy Swayman's better. He certainly has had the better start to the season. He just looks more locked in. Again, Ullmark gives up 5 goals Saturday, Don't think they were all his fault. Don't even think half of them were his fault. But there were a couple in there that like I thought he maybe could have done a little more on, or you would have liked to save. Like the Raymond power play goal. Again, it's enclosed. Raymond was left wide open, but it wasn't exactly a snipe, and it still beats him. I think the Kopp goal the Larkin goal where he sort of got that step on Wotherspoon. Again, like, yeah, the defense in front of him sort of blew it, but again, like not really a snipe, didn't, make a great deke or anything, and just kind of beat him stick side. So, I feel like we got to keep it like in perspective, because we're like, everyone's like, Ullmark's struggling, Swayman's clearly better. And it's like, okay, Linus Ullmark still ranks in the top 10 in the NHL in save percentage and goals against average. And as you said, he's 4-1-1. Like, these are the stakes. Like, Linus Ullmark's still playing like a top 10 goalie. Jeremy Swayman's played like the best goalie in the NHL so far. So I would say right now, this very moment, I'm more confident in him. If that whether or not that remains the case, I don't know.
I guess the way I would describe it, and not to jump in, Bridget, because I'll throw it right to you, but like if the Bruins are in a situation where they have an embarrassment of riches in net, and they feel like there's a deal that is out there at some point in the future to help their team elsewhere, I don't want them trading Swayman, but I would veto a Swayman trade, but I wouldn't veto an Ullmark trade if it made them better. And I guess that's my way of saying, like, I just like Swayman better as a player, I think.
Okay, so those are two different questions. Those are two. I was about to give you. You said you had a sexy question. I was going to give you the least sexy answer possible.
Back to
part one, which is that just please keep rotating them, keep them healthy. I trust both of them. I don't see any reason to think Ullmark is like going to have a terrible slump. I think that last season as well, we had this come up right around the trade deadline, well, pretty much the whole year, but more intensified at the trade deadline. Do you trade Ullmark for, while he's at his highest value? I still think that Swayman is untouchable. So I agree with you on that, which kind of just means that by default, Ullmark would be the guy that you would look to deal if you thought you needed to. However, the same caveat as last year, you're probably better keeping both of them. Just this time in the playoffs, use both of them when you can. Like, act like you have a backup. If you even want to call Swayman that, act like you have a second goalie that if someone struggles, you can put them right in and not wait to game 7 and put them in a tough situation. So keeping both your goalies is probably the move anyway at the trade deadline. I don't think they're. And once again, I hit you with a non-sexy answer to your question of both of them. So you're welcome.
Well, you did just touch on something I want to get ahead of, because I was on this train last year and I want to make sure everyone knows I'm on it again. But if this rotation stays as strong as it was last year, as strong as it's been so far this year, and the last month of the season, Ullmark and Swayman are both playing great, and you're still rotating the playoffs. I'm telling, like,
me
from
too,
last year.
Scott. Me
Yes.
too. I yelled at Jones on the radio because they had me filling in for Megan or Arkin, I forget who it was, for like a week during the playoffs, or like the first week of, or the week before the playoffs, and I was yelling at him, they need to keep rotating, and everybody was yelling back at me no. But anyhow, and by the way, that it wasn't just Jones. Like, this is a popular opinion by like people who are like traditionalists in terms of hockey.
Last year was the opinion of 99% of people around hockey I talked to. Like, no one supported the idea of rotating the playoffs.
Okay, but let me ask you guys this. What we haven't seen, and this dates back to Tuukka before Ullmark was even in town.
Here it comes. Here's the other opinion that we're talking about. It's 2v1, Brian. Be quiet.
No. Look. And by the way, so I bring all this up because I want to bring up a tweet that John Buccigross put out. So I'll get to that. I'm sure maybe you guys saw, maybe you didn't, but I'll read it anyway. But The one thing I honestly, I'll bend the knee. If they want to do a split, fine in the playoffs. I don't care, whatever, whatever. But I will say, and this dates back to when Tuukka was in town before Allmark, we haven't seen Jeremy Swayman been given a playoff series to himself, and I'm kind of interested in that. Like I just am. I want to see. I want to see if he can. Like I want to see how he does as a lone rider in the playoffs. Like I just want to see that. Is that really, like argumentative of me to say? I just want to see what he can do as a goalie who gets a series to himself. So,
I don't think it's argumentative at all. I think it's just that it's just like the classic. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Like it worked through the entire regular season. So give them both their chance. Like I'm not saying give one the whole series. That's kind of the whole point that we're making. And I know what you're saying, Brian, as well. Absolutely, they should have last season and should this year play him more than they did in a playoff series.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll say, like, if I guess my overarching take on like goalies in the playoffs is sort of what Bridget just said, is like stick with what's working. So if we get to March, April, and Swayman's playing better than Allmark, and he's starting to get 2 out of every 3 or 3 out of every 4, then if that's what happens, I'm totally fine with Swayman's the number 1 goalie for the playoffs, and he's playing until he gives us a reason not to. Like, I'm still fine with that. I'm not like saying I'm 100% committed to a rotation no matter what. I'm just saying if you end this season the same way you ended last year, where it's working so well, just use it. And one other thing on this, Billy Jaffe on Morning Brew, this was like a couple weeks ago now, and I feel like it sort of flew under the radar, but he made a comment that he's gotten the impression from people in the organization that they are more willing to use a rotation in the playoffs this year. And he's probably talked to more people than I have, but like I've sort of gotten that sense too. I guess the one thing I would add on to that is that everyone said last year that they were open to the idea, but they didn't do it. So it's one thing to say you're open to it. It's another thing to obviously actually do it when that time comes.
So now, because of a lot of the conversation we had going into last postseason, Scott, that you mentioned how you want to see a split, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'd be lying if I said part of me doesn't want to see if that actually does work. But at the same time, like, have we seen in NHL history like that ever work for a Stanley Cup champion? What we have seen, and that I'm genuinely asking, I don't know the answer.
It worked for.
I can tell you that last year it didn't work when they stuck with mostly Allmark.
It worked for the Bruins in 1972.
Okay.
with Jerry Cheevers and Eddie Johnston.
Well, in the modern era, let's call it.
Yeah, but Brian, I feel like you haven't had. I feel like I'm having the same conversation. I'm having the same conversation.
We're not, because I just said, like, I actually kind of I am curious to see if it works in the postseason. I'm just saying, before we all sit there and say, well, it worked in the regular season, so it's going to work in the postseason, I would just say that we have seen situations like Vegas last year where it's not the same goalie the whole time, right? Or like the Penguins in 16-17 or one of those years, they gave Marc-Andre Fleury like a couple series. They gave who was the other goalie at the time?
Matt Murray.
Yeah, like they split time, but it was kind of like, it wasn't every other game. It was kind of like series, and
it was like partially performance based, because they would each have like 2 or 3 good games and then like 1 or 2 tough ones. So
I just think, look, honest to God, like I really don't care. Like I'm fascinated to see if it does work in the postseason, because it has worked in the regular season. And I do acknowledge that the game is changing and the workload is tough on these goalies. I just think that if you go the alternate goalies in the playoffs, all I'm saying is that there's going to be times where you're like, fuck, who do we go with here? Just like last year in Game 7. And I just think it might create a lot of anxiety in the coach's room and second guessing. And it's tough. It's tough. What do you do?
But I think
you're gonna second guess either way, though. So, and like,
That's what
I
I was
don't
gonna
understand
say.
why it has to be so cut and dry.
Yeah, I think as anytime you have two really good goalies, you're going to have those tough decisions and debates no matter what you do. Like we debated, if I'm remembering correctly, who should start before Game 5. We debated who should start before Game 6, and we and everyone else debated who should start before Game 7. So you still had those debates and tough calls to make, even starting the series with one guy over the other.
I mean, it's definitely uncharted waters, and it'd be fascinating to see how it shakes out. I see the pros and I see potential cons. I think it could be tough for a goaltender because they're different creatures out there than most other hockey players. Like, they have a lot of mental. Between the ears is huge with them, and they have their rituals and their routines, and to know your opponents and to know a game is yours or a series is yours. I just think there's a sense of ownership that sometimes can be troubling if you're going. It works in the regular season. I acknowledge. I think the playoffs are different, but this is a way too premature conversation. Ultimately, I wanted to ask you guys something about what John Buccigross tweeted, because I find it fascinating and I don't even know my answer to this. So I'm going to pawn it off to you two and then maybe steal one of your answers. So just for some context, the Edmonton Oilers are playing awful this year, and the biggest reason so far is their goaltending or lack thereof. So Ryan Whitney tweeted out 2 days ago, Oilers lose, another .852 save percentage type evening. John Buccigross quote tweets that and says this: Ryan, would you trade Draisaitl and Foegele for last year's Vezina winner, i.e. Ullmark, Jake DeBrusk, Matt Poitras, Fabian Lysell, and a 2026 first rounder? The Central Registry would approve this proposed trade for cap and roster implications. What are your thoughts on that hypothetical situation?
No,
I see people
times
saying
a million. No,
I see people saying the Bruins would never do that, and I see people saying the Oilers would never do that. And yeah,
I did not see this tweet. So hold on, read this off again, and I want to pull it up so I can look at the whole thing. But I'm sure some listeners may also need this whole package repeated. So
okay, all right,
one more time.
So Ryan, would you trade Leon Draisaitl and Warren Foegele for last year's Vezina winner, Linus Ullmark, Jake DeBrusk, Matthew Poitras, Fabian Lysell, and a 2026 first rounder? The Central Registry would approve this proposed trade for cap and roster implications.
no.
Man,
Hard pass.
I'm a lot more in the I need to think about this because
Why?
Leon Draisaitl's fucking awesome. That's why. Like,
I mean,
he's
Okay.
one of the three best players in the world.
well, so
Does he make your team, like, does he make this year's chances of winning the Stanley Cup better if you take away one of your, like, two of your prospects, one of your goalies, maybe who might be your better goalie in net by that time of the year, we don't know, and Jake DeBrusk? Like, we've already talked about the holes they have up front. I just don't see how that's super helpful for the Bruins.
well, your top three centers now become Leon Draisaitl, Pavel Zacha, and Charlie Coyle. You replace Linus Ullmark with Jeremy Swayman and Bussy. And yes, Fabian Lysell, for all we know, ends up being a 20-point scorer in the NHL. We don't know. He's still struggling to find his game in the AHL. Matthew Poitras.
He just had his best weekend of the season, by the way. Just had a really strong weekend.
I mean, so Bridget, I hear what you're saying. It's like you're taking a lot of holes away, but I mean, no offense to Jake DeBrusk, but like, or Linus Ullmark, Leon Draisaitl is one of the best hockey players in the world. It's just something to think about. There's a lot there.
I also say no from the Oilers standpoint too. I just say no overall because I think both teams are like, what? Because like Draisaitl, okay, you're getting a new goalie, but you're also getting rid of like so much scoring potential. So you're already having trouble. And I know goalie might be a hard situation for you, but it just seems like that's also not a recipe for, if the end goal is for you to make the playoffs and to have like a decent chance at making a run, I think that hurts them too much.
So my take now, after just a couple minutes of thinking about this, is it's a little too much for me, but I'm still close to 50-50 though. And I think if I could just slightly downgrade like one piece of this, like, can I hang on to, like, is there any chance I can hang on to Poitras and it's a different player instead? Or the first round future first becomes a second? Like, it feels like one too many like high end pieces, but even with that, like I'm still really close. It's like a 47%. It's like a 53% no, 47% yes.
The biggest part for me is Poitras. Like obviously we all love him, and he's 19 years old. I mean, Jake DeBrusk, for all we know, can walk after this season, right? He's a free agent, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
he is. Yeah, this is the contract year for him.
Look, and we all like Jake DeBrusk as a player, but let's be honest. Night to night, he leaves something to be desired. Whether it's he just hasn't. I mean, last year was great. I don't want to take last year away from him, and he was injured and would have had a career year easily. But we're talking about Leon Draisaitl, and we all know that Jeremy Swayman is he's a high-end goaltender in this league, as we've discussed. And the Bruins have goaltending depth in the system. And honestly, goaltending is, I don't want to say it's easy to find, because if it is, Edmonton wouldn't have their issues, but it's been easy to find in Boston. And they've never given me reason to not believe that they can get goaltending in the system, and they already have it. So, I mean, Poitras is the big thing, but you got to give to get, right? And it's not that giving up Allmark isn't giving up or DeBrusk isn't giving up. But, I mean, Leon Draisaitl's, again, he's one of the top players in the world.
What's his contract? How much does he have left on his contract?
It's a great question.
I want to check his age.
Give me 1 second.
Well, he's in Pasternak's draft, so he's probably around 27 years old, right?
28.
Okay. DeBrusk is 26. DeBrusk is 27, I think.
So here's actually, so this becomes another little bit of a complicating factor. So Draisaitl, 28, only has 1 year after this at $8.5 million. So you're also giving him a mega extension.
Yes. No. So that's
to me that only adds to, I need to downgrade one of those pieces. Like I can't give up all of that. But if there's any way I can get it done without giving up one of like Poitras, Lysell, or a first round pick,
I'm not giving up Poitras at all. I just take him out. Just like, no, sorry, he's not.
He's not even a prospect. He's your number 2 center right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, but if you're getting Leon Draisaitl's your number 1 center.
Oh no, exactly.
Is your number 2. So.
No, I know. I'm just saying, like Lysell is still a prospect to us, but Poitras is, I mean, he's an NHLer.
Right. Like I'm not trying to trade Matt Poitras. Obviously, I think he's a part of their long-term future, and is going to be a very good player. But in a mega trade for a superstar like Draisaitl, he wouldn't be untouchable for me.
So we got 2 no's for the 2 of you right now.
Always a hard no.
As Poitras put it.
No
to that exact deal, but open to discussion.
Okay,
that's only because he just loves Draisaitl so much that he's like he was in as soon as he said Draisaitl, and then he was like, maybe not.
There's not much there not to love. Like, he's a pretty great player.
I just want to pull up. I want to pull up Draisaitl's career stats real quick, just because I think Connor McDavid kind of makes people forget how good Draisaitl is, and he has 757 career points in 648 games. and he's a plus 29 on an Oilers team that's never been good defensively in front of that he's been playing for. And if I can,
he had 100. Yeah, he had 128 points last year.
And his playoff stats, I also believe, are through the roof. He has 49 career playoff games, and he has 77 points. Yeah, I'll take Leon Draisaitl. So you know what? For the sake of discussion, and I'm giving up who? Jake DeBrusk and Linus Ullmark and Fabian Lysell, who's played how many pro games? I would hate to give up Poitras, but yeah, I'll take the guy with 128 points last year.
What was the draft pick? That's the one part I missed.
It was a first rounder in 2026
that the Bruins give.
Yeah.
But
honestly,
who are you drafting with a first round pick? No one touching Leon Draisaitl. That's for damn sure.
No.
And
but what if he doesn't want an extension? Like, you're fucked.
I think he would because he's been in Edmonton for so many years with bad defense and goaltending. Like, you come to Boston and you just don't have that. You're a playoff team every year.
Does he have a trade agreement? What's it? Does he have any sort of limitations?
I'm sure he does. Yeah. He has a player submits a 10-team trade list. So he gives the Oilers 10 teams he would accept a trade to.
Guarantee Boston's on that list.
Right. Like, as it should be, because you can say, hey, want to play with David Pastrnak for basically the rest of your career? How's that sound?
Mm-hmm.
If you could guarantee an extension, then that totally changes the entire deal.
I mean, I love what I've seen on Matthew Poitras, but it's like most hockey players never grow up to be Leon Draisaitl in this league. It's just the reality of things. So, and he's still, he's young. He's in his 20s still. Yeah. I'll say yes, just to not do a clean sweep. I don't like the idea of giving up Poitras in that situation, obviously. Yeah. But
I think that's the sticking point for all of us. I think that's really the sticking point for all of us. But I think we had a solid no, a maybe, and a yes is what I'm getting out of this group.
It's a tough yes for me, and that's knowing how good Draisaitl is. That's a very tough yes because, and this was a fun question. It's not we're not wishing any of these players away, but I saw it and I thought it was fun to bring up and see you guys' opinions.
I was not expecting that from Bobo, I'm not gonna lie.
It was off the cuff. Look at this.
Not that we particularly care about this angle of it, but Edmonton, I wonder when they start thinking about next year. Probably not yet because they're in the weakest division in hockey, so they can still turn it around and probably make the playoffs. But man, it's been an absolutely dreadful start for them. Speaking of dreadful starts, just crossed my mind. You guys see what the San Jose Sharks are doing?
Oh my God.
Oh, that was bad.
they're like District 5, stick handling eggs up there. My God.
They're 0-10-1, and they've given up 10 goals in back-to-back games. No one's done that since the Bruins the year before they got Bobby Orr. That's insane.
God bless
them. They really want that first round pick, guys.
Those Sharks are drowning.
They want that number one pick. Unfortunately for them, the ping pong balls don't always fly that way, but
God bless them. God bless them in that little SAP center of theirs. All right.
We did have them picked as last. That was unanimous last place, and they are still holding on to that right now.
No
did
surprise.
you? I mean, we've gone long over this hypothetical trade. Did you want to say something about Ryan Reeves? I feel like that was
something. I guess because I didn't get to it. I just hope that Lucic is back in the lineup when they play Toronto in December, because he's going to have to step up and probably fight him, because if Lucic isn't there, obviously the Maple Leafs are, making this whole thing about the whole Marchand Liljegren incident, which the fact that it's an incident is just, it's bias. It's Toronto bias. It's Marsh. You guys may have discussed it last episode, but it was a hockey play. Marchand's entitled to that ice and that movement. And so the fact that Toronto is making these comments, basically saying we had team meetings addressing the lack of action afterwards, and Reeves pretty much calling up Marchand and, pretty much saying, wait till next game. So obviously the Bruins don't have any.
He could have done something that game.
He could have, but
he could have done something that game. And by the way, this has shades of like the Chara hit on Pacioretty, where it's like, oh, the whole city wants him to come like go to jail or something.
It could have been a tripping penalty. He did get his stick under his skate, but like that's it. Like it's a 2-minute minor for tripping. They're clearly just two guys battling for the puck. It's insane how big of a deal they're making this. Like Sheldon Keefe is like asked about the response, and he's like, well, I hated it. Like we didn't respond, and it's just unbelievable. And it's so funny too, because like everyone has the same reaction of like, boy, too bad they didn't have a guy like Ryan Reeves on their team who stops things like this from happening. And it's like, yeah, you know why Ryan Reeves doesn't stop this from happening? Because you can't play him. I think someone tweeted that the Leafs have been outscored 8-0 with Ryan Reeves on the ice this year. Like, he's not good at hockey, so you can't put him out there. You especially can't put him out there against Brad Marchand, because you know what's going to happen if Ryan Reeves is on the ice at the same time as Brad Marchand? Brad Marchand's going to laugh, skate circles around him, go score a goal.
Well, now that it's been made into a circus up there, because God forbid that their sixth defenseman, gets out muscled in a one-on-one battle. Because it's been a circus, like Toronto's they're going to try to do something about it when they play next. And all I'm saying is that Ryan Reeves might not be a great hockey player, as Scott said it, but he can fight as good as pretty much anybody. And I think he's a little bit out of Trent Frederick's weight class. So big boy Luch is going to have to step up in that game, and if he's healthy. And I guess that's my only thoughts on that. It's kind of ridiculous that Toronto's making this a thing still. But yeah, I guess a conversation for a later date. To revisit. Bridget and Scott, we're a little bit over. Any final takeaways?
I'm just checking that game is December 2nd. The next game they play Toronto is December 2nd. Yeah,
low key, like about a month away, and Lucic is on LTIR, so I don't know if he'll be back by then, but it'll be close.
I would imagine he should be. I mean, initially Montgomery said a couple weeks, which like would have put it early to mid-November, and then with the long-term IR, like he's eligible to be back in middle of November, so I would guess he's back, but I don't know. Maybe it doesn't quite feel right.
He didn't have the boot on the ninth floor when we saw him this past game, so
yeah, he had that off. Yeah, he's had that off for a little while. Like last week around Warrior, he didn't have anything. So
yeah, but the only issue with this is that I have a broadcast that day. Damn it. I'm gonna have to wait and watch it after. Oh, I don't like that. Wait, actually, it might be a 3:00 broadcast. I might be fine. I don't know. Hopefully, I can see it live.
Hopefully, you can also watch Bruins and Stars live. That is tomorrow night, but you'll be listening to this on Monday, so it's Monday night. In case you're listening to this on Monday, which you will be. That's when it drops. So the Bruins are playing the Stars tonight. Everybody, just forget I said tomorrow night. They're playing tonight at 8:00, and Bridget, Scott, and I will be back probably Tuesday night or Wednesday for our next episode.
We only changed the clocks an hour, Brian, not a full day.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes we got to keep up with this, fall back, skate pot ahead type thing,
I really thought this was the year we got rid of it. Like how people fall for it every year. I never do, and this year I was like, they did it, really did, and then I was like, man, I fell for it. Okay, like then just get rid of it. I hate it so much. It's dark.
I know.
It's dark so early. I hate it. I hate the spring one too, just as much. So
I know. I love the classic like conversation amongst New Englanders like every October, like, oh boy, it's getting darker earlier. It's like, or oh boy, it's getting cold already. It's like, yeah, no shit, it's November. We always just have these like same isms where every year it's the same thing, but we always act surprised. Oh my god, wow, it's getting colder, huh? Well, yeah, it's Thanksgiving.
I thought this year was going to be summer the whole year, guys.
Yeah. Well,
what about global warming?
Hopefully everybody listening enjoyed their extra hour of sleep this weekend, and you get the rest for the week upcoming. So thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you very soon. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
not in front of a screen, you can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.